Let's welcome back director Brett Morgen. For those who don't know, I'm Janet Pearson. I'm the head of South by Southwest Film, and it was so meaningful for us to be able to invite this film. I just think it's so powerful, and it's a film where you have clearly an artist approaching another artist, you know, as opposed to two forces kind of melding, as opposed to, and there are other ways to approach films. Anyway, can you talk about how you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, the sort of general premise was that to allow Kurt to tell the story of his life through his art. And because he worked in so many different forms of media, you know, both audio and visual, that it felt, and he was so expressive about it, that it felt sort of let him tell his story. And filmically, we had to find a language that worked for that, because it's very different than the kid stays in the picture visually. And so it was I think for all the department heads, the sound department and the editing department, all of us, we sort of had to sort of try to appropriate Kurt's language, if you will. Yeah.
We have mics set up here. If you want to ask questions, you can line up at the mics. But we were just talking backstage for a second and talk about the original material.
Yeah, well, it became, you know, when we started the movie, when we started editing, we assembled all the footage, we got all the footage together, and we started screening it chronologically. And when we got to the part that we've all seen previously from 91 to 94, it felt like really this was going to be a real enormous challenge to try to get to where we needed to get with Kurt. And it was in all the other footage, particularly the stuff we found in the storage facility, that I felt we were able to really access him. And that was, I think so out of necessity, about 85% of what we hear and see in the film is sort of rare or never seen material. But that wasn't normally that's sort of the goal, but in this case it was this sort of out of necessity to get to where we needed to go.
Cool. Yes?
Yeah, I noticed that Dave Grohl isn't in any interview in the movie.
He isn't?
Yeah?
Did anyone else notice? Yeah, no. So here's the thing, like, it's a film that's meant to be as intimate as humanly possible. So the subjects were very primal: the mom, the dad, the sister, the girlfriend, the wife, and the best friend. And I didn't feel that we necessarily needed two representatives of Nirvana to represent Kurt's interest at that time. That said, I didn't want to be in the situation where I was at a screening and the first question was about Dave. So we did reach out and try to do an interview, and he was recording his album, so he wasn't available. And then I locked a picture on the film, and this was a really long 8-year journey. And then 3 weeks after we locked picture, he was available to do an interview. But if you've ever made a film that you've been working on for that long and you lock picture, it's like a little difficult to try to get something in there, because we were content with the film. That was the movie. So it was over the holidays, and we were racing to get to the premiere, and there just wasn't enough time. And then we went from Sundance to Berlin, and then the studio said, you need to get back to work. And I went back, and so here's the truth. After all of that, I had no objectivity left. I had put everything I had into getting that my ability to sort of survey the film the way you need to as a director to check the pacing was done.
Sure.
So.
Did a great job, man.
Thank you. You know, I'm so sorry, before the movie, I wanted to get started quickly because I know some of you have been waiting for a while, but there's a couple people I have to thank profusely for being here besides Janet, who I guess we could now say was literally the first person in the world who saw the film. But
Very proudly, actually.
But I am the face of this project, but I struggled for 8 years to get this film made. And it wasn't until I met David Byrne, my executive producer, that we really were able to push this thing forward. And David, I know you're bummed out that I'm pointing you out right now, but I just have to acknowledge you because this film doesn't exist without you. David is the one who made sure, I'll just shut up there, but this film doesn't exist without David. And very, not so quickly, but I just have to say that the last time I was at South by Southwest was 16 years ago. And I was programmed as opposite opening night film. So everybody was here, and I was at the convention center, and there were 9 people in the audience. One of
Probably weren't
whom,
that many people here either. 16 years ago.
one of whom, so it was really easy to see people, and I fell in love instantly with my wife, who I met at South by Southwest 16 years ago. So Deborah, she's our executive producer too. So she's also guides everything I do. So thank you so very much for being here. Yeah, thanks.
I love that story so much.
It's
Because things happen here, you know what I mean?
It's a
Sometimes it's
romantic
about the
comedy.
film, and sometimes it's about other things that are more than that, and I just couldn't be happier with that. Okay.
Yo, I may pass out the second time in 5 days in this theater. Brian Wilson film and now Kurt Cobain, and I appreciate you giving me the ticket outside today, Brett. The magic now that time has gone by with these films, we're seeing moments that we've never imagined that we'd be able to see, like Kurt Cobain coming up with Floyd the Barber, or Bleach sessions, humming the tunes in his bedroom, coming up with these montages, him messing with the 4-track, all the way to the Chaos Radio appearance on that Olympia radio where he's playing Opinion. We never thought we'd see these kind of moments, and it's almost going in our waking life subconscious. Bob Sebastian's Zone, can you tell us about how that came about? And
Oh, the animation.
yeah,
The animation,
but it's
yeah.
all based on real audio.
Yeah, it's all, well, what with like the real treasure find, the real sort of the thing when I, to quickly get up to speed, at some point, Courtney and Francis agreed to let me go into the storage facility where everything is housed and document everything in there. And so I went in with the crew, and we started going through stuff, and I opened up a box, and there were 200 hours of audio in there. And it had not been, I don't think, sort of listened. Well, I know it had, most of it had never been listened to. So the story Kurt tells in the movie about losing his virginity, no ears had ever heard that tape. And I had asked Tracy, and I had asked Courtney, and I asked Chris. And the same thing with Kurt's version of And I Love Her. Nobody had ever heard it before. And so most of the audio in that treasure chest was stuff Kurt just recorded when a lot of it was at Tracy's house. And what I loved about it was that was where I felt closest to him, and you could feel the joy in the creative process, just being sort of there alone doing his thing. And it, I have to say, made me feel so good to be able to see him and experience him in such a sort of fulfilled place, because it was so different than how I viewed him at the time through the lens of the media. So that stuff, like the montage at Tracy's house, that was like 2 months of editing audio. And then once we had the audio locked on it, I hooked up with an animator in the Netherlands named Sxsw Husling. And the idea was that we were going to do it in traditional animation. He did 6,000 drawings and 58 4x6 foot oil canvases for the backgrounds. And it was kind of like, that was the thing with this film, because it takes a village, and it was a small village, but all the people who really, I mean, we were all wanted to get it right, and everyone sort of really pushed themselves. So, and then there was another animator named Stefan Nadelman who did all the journals. And that was like about 8 months to a year of developing the aesthetic to try to, because all those were just one photograph on an animation stand shot 90 degrees straight down. But we wanted to give it life and make it feel like it was, you know, sort of shot on Super 8 camera and stuff, to give it an analog feel. I hope that.
Super
Thanks.
cool, actually. Yeah. Go ahead.
The film obviously is very sort of comprehensive in its treatment of his life, and I'm sort of curious how, whether you struggled with how to end it basically, or how to treat his death in a way that sort of works for the film.
Frances is my executive producer, and after she saw the film, one of the things she said to me is, she said, "You know what my favorite part of the film is?" And I said, "What?" She goes, "The end." And I said, "What part of the end?" She goes, "How it cuts to black." And it really seemed like the only way to end it. The journey that the film, you know, when you're doing a biopic, or a biography in 120 minutes or 135 or 140, whatever it is, you have to sort of, you can't hit everything. So you choose your sort of through line of action. And when we get to the end with the story that Courtney tells about Kurt's perceived betrayal, rejection, whatever you want to call it, it felt to me that the story was complete, and everything after that was gossip and innuendo. And so it felt like the story was over. And rather than have, you know, Courtney reading his suicide letter at the funeral or seeing flowers on the grave or whatever, it just felt like a little more honest this way. There's no cathartic, I mean, you know, and it was, you know, of course, as a filmmaker, you're tempted to be, well, we can't do that to the viewer. We have to soften it a little bit at the end, or have, you know, the traditional thing where everyone sits around and goes, well, you know, he really touched a lot of lives, and you know, the kids all over the world get comfort out of him, and then it's this faux happy ending, but it's sad, man, you know? So it felt like that was how, there was no other ending. We never tried it in any other way. After she told me that, though, I did extend the length of the black. How far can we push this?
Yes.
So I think that, you know, we're all inspired by certain songs from Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, but like, what was the moment that inspired you to really like think that this is a story that you want to tell?
I felt like I'd been doing movies about guys in their 70s, like, and this was really personal. You know, I felt like, you know, hopefully, I would imagine a lot of us saw ourselves in those images, whether it's our children or ourselves. And so this felt really personal, and it felt very much about a film about my generation, which was Kurt's generation. He's a year older than me. And a very specific time in America.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to say if Kurt's parents met 5 years later, they probably would have never got married. And if they met 5 years earlier, they might have never got divorced. And it's a really specific generation I just happen to have grown up in. So this, to me, felt very personal. Felt like the first story of our generation, in a way. I didn't mean to age you and put you into my generation.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I apologize.
Like what, like, yeah, that decision where you're like, this is a story that I can relate to. Like,
It's the, you know, because, well, the thing is, I was working off of primary sources. I didn't know Kurt, you know? So I'm working off primary sources, and I went in with, I mean, everyone has an agenda, so I can't say there's no agenda, because I must have had one. I don't know what it was, but, you know, I went in pretty pure, and I'm looking at all the material, and the story that came clear to me was not that his quest in life was to be a rock star, and that when he got tired of being a rock star, he didn't want to live anymore. It felt to me like it was a family origin story, and that it was, in many ways, a journey to try to reclaim those first couple years, and doing it with the band, and doing it with Tracy, and ultimately with Courtney and Frances. And that taps into the universal, so then it becomes a universal story that hopefully we can all relate to, whether it's a father, son, daughter, what have you. And I think that's really what you try to do with these films, is you try, you know, I mean, this is, you know, it's you can't say it's the definitive Cobain film because it's you know, Kurt's so iconic that there will be another 20 whatever, there will be another generation will come back to this story, and they're going to look and they're going to see something different. But since I was here 16 years ago, I also started a family. And so a lot of that, I think, was reflected in how I interpreted the footage. But, you know, that's organic. There's not like, that was forced on. It's just how it.
I was looking for your personal opinion, so that's pretty much it.
I think so. That got personal. Thank you. Thank you all for staying this late. I know we'll try to wrap this soon, Janet, because I'm sure they want to go to dinner.
We'll save the last. These are the last three then.
Or there's bands.
Go ahead.
It's a gorgeous movie.
Thank you.
The edit's incredible. Can you talk about your working process of especially the relationship between editing picture and editing sound and how those go together and which was leading and that kind of thing?
See, they're running out of air and herds on that one. No,
But I wanna know, so
dude,
fuck
and I
them.
can't tell you how much I appreciate that question. Because sound design to me is such a vital part of Kurt's sort of view of the world and such a wonderful underutilized aspect of film in these. But this was the type of film that allowed us the opportunity to create an immersive sound experience, because it wasn't about Foley and it wasn't about there was nothing to Foley. You know, everything was manufactured and sort of ethereal. So, you know, it enabled us to create the sort of Kurt's psychology through sound, and most of those sounds were Kurt's. Everything on top that you were hearing, they were Kurt's sound effects. I had a great sound design team that supplemented it underneath, but it was like sculpting with sound. You know, it was really an awesome opportunity. You know, to really find it, and then editing. It's just, I don't know, man. There's you know, it's just, this was a hard film for the editors, though. We went through a bunch of different editors on it to try to get the language, the grammar of the film. Because some films, when you could use archival and ways that we're doing it, sometimes it's too show and tell, and this had to be sort of asymmetrical, and so, anyway, but thank you for your question. We'll just make this
when you talk about the 8 years, was in terms of the edit, is there a time? Can you put a time?
Yeah, and honestly, we would still be in those 8 years if it wasn't for David Byrne over there. Sorry, David. I would say the last 2 year and a half was that editing or something like that. Cool. But if those were 9 to 5. So it was really 3 years of editing, Janet. We squeezed in.
We had said these last two. I'm sorry, your third guy. You're like one too many. But
Well,
go ahead.
Congrats on the film. It's awesome. I think we all loved it.
Thank you.
My question is, what are some of the jewels or secrets that you discovered but couldn't fit into the narrative of your final edit?
There's a lot of great music. There was a lot, and I will confess, when we were making the film, you know, you're sort of reaching, grabbing, and trying to throw it together, and yeah, there was a lot of really great music. I mean, my favorite things are here, though, for the most part, you know. Janet, my wife and I discovered a great drinking game for this town. I just have to say, you walk down the 6th Street, and you have a beer, and if you see someone older than you, you take a drink. Because we went home dead sober last night. All right. Anyway, thank you very much. Right, Janet? One more. I'm so sorry. One more.
That's all right. It's actually not really a question, so you've got off easy. I just wanted to thank you for making the film, congratulate you on the film, and I felt that it was almost like getting to know someone who I always wanted to know or wanted to know more about, and I think that the way you told this film was like finding out about an old friend. So thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Wonderful.
it.